Playwright versus Selenium. This debate keeps coming back. Someone says Selenium is dead. Someone else says Playwright is overhyped. Then someone posts a benchmark showing that one is faster. But most of the time, the debate misses the real point. The question is not which library can click a button faster. The question is, which approach helps your team ship reliable software with the least amount of wasted time? Because test automation is not just about writing browser automation code. It is about reliability, maintenance, adoption, reporting, infrastructure, debugging, and ROI. So in this video, I'll compare Playwright and Selenium across architecture, languages, browsers, limitations, AI compatibility, myths, common pitfalls, what successful teams are actually using, and modern alternatives like Endtest. The purpose: reliable web test automation. Both Playwright and Selenium exist to automate browsers. You tell the browser, go to this page, click this button, type this text, check that this message appears, and both tools can do that. You can build automated tests with Selenium, you can build automated tests with Playwright, you can also build terrible automated tests with both. That is the part people forget. Switching from Selenium to Playwright does not automatically fix flaky tests, and rewriting your test suite in a modern framework does not automatically create a good QA process. Stable test automation depends on a lot of things: reliable locators, proper weights, clean test data, stable environments, useful reports, cross-browser infrastructure, debugging tools, and team adoption. The library matters, but it is only one part of the system. Architecture differences. Selenium uses WebDriver. Your test sends commands to a browser driver, and the driver controls the browser. Selenium has been around for a long time, and WebDriver became a browser automation standard. That is one of Selenium's biggest strengths. It is mature, widely supported, and flexible. Playwright has a more modern architecture. It communicates with browsers through its own automation layer and includes features like browser contexts, auto-weighting, tracing, test isolation, and built-in tooling. So the simple version is: Selenium is more standard and universal. Playwright is more integrated and modern by default. That does not mean one is automatically better. It means they made different trade-offs. Supported languages. Selenium has broad language support. It is commonly used with Java, C#, Python, JavaScript, Ruby, and other languages. Playwright supports JavaScript and TypeScript, Python, Java, and .NET. In practice, language support is rarely the real deciding factor. If your company is Java-heavy, Selenium may feel more familiar. If your front-end team works mostly in TypeScript, Playwright may feel more natural. But the bigger question is not, which language can we use? The bigger question is, who will maintain this system over time? If the answer is one engineer who loves automation, that may work for a while. But what happens when that engineer leaves? What happens when the framework becomes too complex for QA to use? What happens when developers stop trusting the test results? That is where many internal frameworks start to fail. Supported browsers. Selenium supports the major browsers through browser-specific drivers: Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Safari, and others depending on the environment. Playwright supports Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit, and can also run branded browsers like Chrome and Edge. But browser support is not just a checkbox. For real end-to-end testing, you need to know where those browsers are running. Are they real browsers? Are they running on Windows? Are they running on Mac OS? Can you test Safari on actual Mac OS machines? Can you reproduce failures? Can you record videos? Can you capture screenshots, console logs, and network logs? A test passing locally is not the same as a test passing on reliable cross-browser infrastructure. Limitations. Selenium's main limitation is not that it is old. That is a lazy argument. Selenium is still powerful and still very relevant. The real limitation is that Selenium gives you browser automation, but you still have to build a lot around it. You need reporting, you need retries, you need screenshots, you need videos, you need parallel execution, you need browser infrastructure, you need driver management, you need CI integration, you need secrets management, you need test data management, you may need email testing, SMS testing, file testing, database checks, permissions, audit logs, and activity logs. Playwright gives you more out of the box than Selenium, especially if you use Playwright Test. But even with Playwright, you are still building an internal testing system, and that is where the hidden cost appears. The library is free. The engineering time is not free. The maintenance is not free. The opportunity cost is not free. If your team spends months building a testing platform, that is time not spent improving the actual product. Compatibility with AI. Now let's talk about AI. A lot of teams are trying to add AI on top of Playwright and Selenium, and at first it looks impressive. You ask AI to generate a test, it writes code, you run it, it works once, and it feels like the future. Playwright also has MCP now, which sounds useful because it gives AI agents a way to interact with the browser, but in practice, you have to be careful. MCP can consume a lot of tokens, and for many test automation tasks, you can get results that are just as good by doing something much simpler. Fetch a screenshot, fetch the page source, send both to an AI model, and ask it for the best selector for an element. You do not always need an AI agent driving the browser. Sometimes you just need AI to help with one specific decision. That is the bigger lesson. In test automation, you should use AI only when you actually need it. If you already have a reliable locator for an element, use the locator. Do not ask AI every single time, "Where is the login button?" That is wasteful. It consumes tokens, it adds latency, it adds uncertainty, and it may return a different answer later. A reliable locator is better than an AI guess. AI is useful for test creation, locator suggestions, self-healing, understanding failures, and helping with maintenance. But AI should not be called for every basic action in a test. That is one of the problems with AI-generated Playwright or Selenium code. AI makes it easier to create more code, but more code is not always better. It can create duplicated flows, inconsistent selectors, fragile tests, and a framework that becomes harder to maintain. This is why AI works better when it is part of a controlled testing platform. For example, with Endtest, the goal is not to generate a giant pile of code and leave your team to maintain it. The goal is to create editable, reviewable tests, use AI where it actually helps, run them across browsers, and keep the whole process understandable for the team. AI should reduce maintenance, it should not create more maintenance. Myths. There are a few myths around Playwright and Selenium. The first myth is Playwright is always faster. Sometimes it is faster. Sometimes the difference does not matter. Performance depends on your app, your weights, your environment, your network, your selectors, and your browser infrastructure. If your staging environment is slow, switching libraries will not magically fix that. The second myth is Selenium is flaky. Selenium itself is not flaky. Playwright itself is not magic. Most flakiness comes from bad weights, weak locators, shared test data, unstable environments, race conditions, and tests that depend on previous state. Playwright helps with auto-weighting, and that is useful. But if the application or environment is unstable, Playwright cannot fully save you. The third myth is Selenium is not suited for modern apps. That is not true. Selenium can test React, Angular, Vue, SPAs, dashboards, admin panels, and complex flows. The issue is not usually Selenium. The issue is the test design. Common pitfalls. The first pitfall is treating test automation as a side project. Someone says, "I'll just set up Playwright this week." Or, "We already have Selenium, we just need a few more tests." 1 year later, there are hundreds of tests, half of them are unstable, nobody knows which ones matter, and CI failures are ignored. The second pitfall is optimizing for writing tests instead of maintaining tests. Writing the code is the easy part. Maintenance is where most of the time goes. The third pitfall is building too much infrastructure internally. At first, it sounds reasonable. Let's build our own dashboard, our own reports, our own retries, our own browser cloud, our own AI repair, our own email testing, our own permission system. But at some point, you are no longer just writing tests. You are building a test automation platform inside your company, and unless that is your core business, it usually does not make sense. What successful teams are using? Yeah, and if you look at successful companies from the outside, you might assume they are just using Selenium or Playwright internally and everything is perfect. But when you actually get insights from serious teams, you often see something different. They may still use Selenium or Playwright for some technical testing, but for important end-to-end testing, many teams use modern enterprise alternatives. Why? Because allocating engineering time to build and maintain an internal framework is usually not efficient. Senior engineers are expensive, QA time is expensive, slow releases are expensive, unstable test suites are expensive, and false confidence is very expensive. That is why ROI matters. A free library is not the same as a free testing strategy. Playwright and Selenium are free, like bricks are free. You still have to build the house, then maintain the house, then add plumbing, security, dashboards, permissions, reports, logs, and debugging tools. A library is not a platform. And for many teams, using an enterprise tool is cheaper than spending months or years building and maintaining an internal framework. The mistake is thinking we have strong engineers so we can build this ourselves. Of course you can, but capability is not the same thing as ROI. Just because your engineering team can build an internal framework does not mean it is the best use of their time. In most companies, it is not. Because the real cost is not writing the first tests. The real cost is everything that comes after: maintenance, browser infrastructure, reporting, debugging, permissions, logs, test data, onboarding, and getting the rest of the team to actually use the system. Modern alternatives. This is where Endtest fits in. Endtest is not trying to win a religious debate about whether Selenium or Playwright is better. The point is different. The point is to give teams a modern, enterprise-friendly testing platform from day one. You get test creation, AI features, cross-browser execution, reports, activity logs, role-based permissions, debugging information, and maintenance workflows without having to build all of that yourself. That matters for small teams because engineering time is limited. It matters for enterprise teams because permissions, reports, audit logs, and governance are not optional. And it matters for QA teams because the goal is not to impress people with a clever framework. The goal is to catch bugs before users do. Conclusion. So, Playwright versus Selenium. Which one should you use? Both Selenium and Playwright are capable tools. Selenium is mature, flexible, and standardized. Playwright is modern, developer-friendly, and has great built-in tooling. But capability is not the same thing as ROI. Just because your engineering team can build an internal framework does not mean it is the best use of their time. In most companies, it is not. For serious end-to-end testing, the library is only one part of the decision. The real questions are, who will maintain the tests? Who will debug failures? Who will manage browser infrastructure? Who will handle reports, permissions, logs, email testing, SMS testing, file testing, and database checks? Who will keep the framework alive 2 years from now? Many internal Selenium and Playwright frameworks do not fail because the library is bad. They fail because the company slowly realizes that it has been spending expensive engineering time building and maintaining a testing platform instead of building the actual product. And even when the framework technically works, the ROI can still be poor. If only a few engineers can use it, if maintenance keeps growing, if QA depends on developers for every change, and if reports are not useful to the broader team, then the framework is not really successful. It is just another internal system that needs to be maintained. AI can help, but if AI just creates more code inside a fragile framework, it can accelerate the problem. So do not choose based on hype. Do not choose based on benchmarks, choose based on ROI, choose based on maintainability, choose based on adoption, choose based on whether your team can still trust the system after 12 months, 24 months, and thousands of test runs. And if you do not want to spend the next year building and maintaining your own internal testing platform, a modern alternative like Endtest may be the more practical choice. Not because Selenium is bad, not because Playwright is bad, but because your team probably has better things to build.